The twin suns of the Illyrian system hung low in the sky, casting long, golden shadows across the sprawling palace city of Corinth. From her high balcony, Princess Lyra stood alone, the wind whipping her dark hair around her face. She was a warrior among her people, known for skill and courage that few dared challenge. Yet the same reputation that earned her respect also earned her isolation. No alien suitor wanted to marry the fierce princess, not when she could crush a rival without hesitation and dismiss a courtier with nothing more than a look. Lyra's people loved her bravery, but they also whispered about her temper, about the sharp edge in her words, the sudden flash of anger that no one could predict. She had grown accustomed to being alone, to wandering the palace gardens and training fields without companions. She did not crave attention, yet she often wondered if there was someone out there who could match her, not in strength, but in understanding. Today was no ordinary day. A delegation of humans had arrived from the distant star cluster of Solara. They were curious, observers mostly, though their presence was meant to signal peace and trade opportunities. Lyra had little interest in diplomats and traders, especially humans. Her kind had always regarded them as weak, fragile, and unpredictable. Their ships were slow, their weapons rudimentary compared to Illyrian technology, and their culture strange. Still, the arrival of the humans brought something unusual. A single human man walked among them with a confidence that did not rely on strength or intimidation. His posture was calm, his gaze steady, and there was a quiet courage in the way he moved through a palace that had once been the proving ground of countless warriors. He did not flinch at the palace guards' stares, nor did he bow excessively, nor did he smile in false deference. Lyra noticed him first during the public demonstration of her combat skills. Today she was to spar with the royal guards, showing the humans what a true Illyrian warrior could do. The courtyard was filled with dignitaries, ambassadors, and curious spectators, all eager to see the princess in action. She had trained for this moment, as always, executing each move with precision, strength, and elegance. The fight began and the guards pressed her, testing her speed and reflexes. Lyra moved with fluidity, a dance of power and control. She disarmed one opponent with a swift strike to the wrist, rolled under another's swing, and sent a third tumbling with a calculated push. Every observer leaned forward in awe, but it was the humans who caught her attention, particularly the man who stood apart from the others. He watched without fear, his eyes sharp yet respectful. He did not gasp at the sound of bones cracking in training or avert his gaze at the display of power. Instead, he simply watched. When the spar ended, sweat gleaming on her brow, Lyra expected the usual reaction: fear, admiration tinged with caution, or whispers of too fierce and too dangerous. But this human stepped forward quietly, without ceremony. "You fought well," he said, his voice even, calm and steady. "You are fast, precise, and clever. The way you moved, it is more than strength, it is intelligence." "I am Lyra," she said, testing him. Her tone was guarded, a subtle edge hiding curiosity. "And you are." She did not often meet sincerity in her world, where diplomacy was wrapped in lies and power plays. "Help," she repeated, a hint of skepticism in her voice. "You understand nothing of our battles or our ways. How could you help?" She had spent centuries relying on power and skill. To hear someone suggest that courage and understanding could rival her training was unusual, intriguing. Over the next few days, Lyra noticed him often. He did not follow her blindly or attempt to impress her with knowledge of her people. Instead, he asked questions, simple, thoughtful questions about her life, her training, her people, and even the loneliness that often crept into her thoughts. He listened without judgment, and slowly Lyra began to respond. One afternoon, she found herself walking beside him in the palace gardens. The golden sun made the flowers glow, and the gentle wind carried the faint scent of alien blooms. Lyra did not often allow herself moments of peace, yet here she was, walking alongside a human she barely knew, yet who felt strangely safe. "Do you ever get tired of being strong all the time?" Ethan asked softly, his eyes on the horizon. Lyra paused. His question struck at a part of her she rarely revealed. "Sometimes," she admitted. "Strength is expected, it is admired, but it isolates. No one can approach me without fear, and those who try, they do so cautiously, always calculating whether I will crush them. I grow tired of it." "You are very bold for a human." Later that evening, the palace courtiers whispered about the strange human who dared speak so freely to the princess. Many disapproved, labeling him naive or foolish. Yet Lyra did not care. She had spent her life worrying about what others thought, and it had only left her lonely. Now there was someone who saw her clearly. That night, Lyra stood once more on her balcony, staring at the twin suns as they dipped below the horizon. She thought about Ethan, the human who had walked into her life without fanfare and seen her without fear. She felt a warmth in her chest, a quiet thrill she had not known in years. Perhaps, she thought, the universe was larger than she imagined. Perhaps strength and courage came in many forms, and perhaps even a fierce princess could find a companion among the stars, one she would choose, not one who was forced upon her by tradition or politics. The next morning, Lyra found Ethan waiting at the courtyard, as if he had anticipated her thoughts. He did not bow, did not offer a gift, did not speak in empty flattery. He simply nodded, a gesture that said he was ready to walk beside her however she chose. "Are you ready to see more of Corinth?" he asked. Lyra hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, show me your world, human." For the first time, Lyra felt that someone had stepped into her life not to fear her, not to impress her, but to simply walk beside her. The whispers of the courtiers faded into the background. Lyra did not need their approval. She had found something far rarer, a kindred spirit, a companion, a human who had looked at her not as a challenge, but as a person. And as the twin suns rose higher in the sky, she felt the faint stirrings of something new, hope. It was the beginning of a journey neither of them fully understood. The galaxy was vast, full of danger, diplomacy, and battles yet to come. But for Lyra, for the first time in her life, the path forward seemed less lonely. And for Ethan, he understood that humans might be underestimated, but in the right moment they could change worlds and perhaps even hearts. As they disappeared into the gardens, the palace guards watched in silence. The fierce princess, alone no longer, walked with a human at her side. And the galaxy, vast and indifferent, seemed just a little smaller, a little more welcoming because of it. The day after the sparring demonstration, the palace was alive with a quiet tension. Courtiers whispered behind closed doors, ambassadors exchanged discreet glances, and guards moved a little more rigidly along the corridors. All of them had seen the human, Ethan, speak to Princess Lyra without fear, without awe, without the careful caution every other alien showed. For some, it was shocking. For others, it was worrying. But for Lyra, it was simply normal. She moved through the halls with her usual grace, her armor polished, her expression sharp, yet something in her thoughts had shifted. The memory of Ethan's calm gaze, his words of understanding and courage, lingered longer than she cared to admit. Normally, she dismissed outsiders quickly, especially humans. But this one, he did not need her respect. He had earned it simply by being unafraid. Ethan, meanwhile, explored the palace quietly, guided only by curiosity and careful observation. He had watched the demonstration and been impressed, not just by her skill, but by the way Lyra carried herself. Every movement, every decision told him that she was disciplined, focused, and unyielding. And yet beneath the armor and the reputation, he sensed a quiet loneliness, a longing for someone to truly see her. Their next meeting was not planned. Lyra had been walking the eastern garden, enjoying the rare morning calm, when she found Ethan examining the alien flora, his eyes wide with curiosity. She raised an eyebrow. "You are very interested in flowers for a warrior," she said. Ethan turned, startled but not alarmed. "They are fascinating," he replied. "Some of them move with the wind in a way I have never seen, and their colors, they are different from what we have on Solara. It is beautiful." There was no hidden agenda, no testing her reaction. He simply appreciated what he saw. She felt a flicker of something unfamiliar, a connection. "Do humans often travel so far from their world just to study plants?" she asked, curious despite herself. Ethan smiled. "Some do, many come seeking knowledge, others come seeking adventure. I suppose I came for both." Adventure was something she knew well, though few humans ever imagined it. Her life was filled with danger, training, and political maneuvering, and yet she wondered what it meant to approach danger not as a duty but as curiosity. "You are very different from the other humans here," she said finally. "I am learning," he said simply, "and perhaps you are different from the other princesses. That is why we understand each other." Over the next days, their paths crossed more often. Ethan followed her through the training halls, the palace gardens, and even the observation decks that overlooked the city. He asked questions about her culture, her people, her role as a warrior. He spoke of his own world in return, telling stories of human courage, invention, and unconventional strategies. Lyra found herself drawn into these stories, intrigued by a perspective so different from her own. One afternoon, she challenged him. "Tell me, human, would you survive a day in my training grounds?" "We improvise, we think, we learn quickly." He observed carefully, learned quickly, and found ways to complete the challenges using ingenuity rather than brute force. Lyra watched, impressed despite herself. Most would have collapsed, bruised, and exhausted, yet he adapted, adjusted, and overcame in ways she had not anticipated. There was cleverness in him, a quality that even the most skilled alien warriors sometimes lacked. She felt a quiet respect growing inside her. "You surprise me," she said when the test ended. "Most humans would have failed." Lyra began to confide in him, sharing small frustrations and fleeting fears she had long kept hidden. Ethan listened without judgment, offering insight without command. She found herself thinking of him during her patrols and training sessions, wondering what he might say or do in moments of uncertainty. The palace, however, was not entirely accepting of their growing friendship. Courtiers whispered, advisors frowned, and the occasional ambassador sent sharp glances Ethan's way. Many believed he had no place alongside the princess, that humans were too weak to influence her or her people. They mocked his calm demeanor, misinterpreted his quiet observation as cowardice, and speculated on his intentions. Lyra ignored them. For the first time, she did not need approval or fear judgment. She had someone who saw her clearly, someone who valued courage and intelligence over fear and tradition. That was enough. One evening, a minor crisis tested the bond between them. A group of rogue mercenaries had entered the city, seeking to provoke a confrontation and test the strength of the palace guards. Lyra, always alert, detected them before they could strike. She moved swiftly to intercept them, her combat skills unmatched. Yet the humans accompanying the delegation froze, unsure of what to do. Ethan did not hesitate. He observed the mercenaries carefully, noting their positions and weaknesses. He called out directions to the guards, guiding them to defend without unnecessary conflict. His instructions were precise, his timing perfect. Together, Lyra and Ethan neutralized the threat with minimal damage. The courtiers were stunned. The human whom they had underestimated had played a crucial role in protecting the princess and the palace. Lyra looked at him afterward, her expression unreadable but her eyes shining with admiration. "You have courage," she said simply. "And you have trust," he replied. "Courage alone is not enough." As the sun set over Corinth, Lyra found herself walking the palace ramparts with Ethan once more. The city below glowed with light, the streets alive with the hum of activity, yet up here the world felt quieter, suspended. "You see the city differently," he said, pointing to the bridges and towers. "To me, it is not just a palace. It is a network of lives, of decisions, of courage. Every person you lead has a story. Or perhaps humans see differently. That can be a gift." The palace walls could contain armies and politics, but they could not contain this feeling. And as the stars began to appear, scattered like jewels across the evening sky, Lyra realized that the universe might be larger and stranger than she had ever imagined. There were new possibilities, new friendships, and perhaps even new love waiting beyond the boundaries of expectation. For the first time, she did not feel entirely alone. And for Ethan, he knew the galaxy was full of challenges, but he also understood that humans had ways to face them, through courage, ingenuity, and loyalty. Lyra, fierce and unyielding, had seen him as more than a weak human, and he, in turn, saw her as more than a warrior, more than a princess. He saw her as a person, capable of great strength, vulnerability, and wisdom. Together, they were beginning a journey neither of them fully understood, a journey that might change not only their lives but the galaxy itself. As they walked back toward the palace, side by side, Lyra felt the faint stir of hope, a rare emotion she had long suppressed. Perhaps, she thought, this human could teach her something she had never learned. That courage was not just about battle, and strength was not just about muscle. And perhaps, just perhaps, trust and friendship could be as powerful as any weapon. The palace lights glimmered in the distance, the air cool and calm. The human beside her did not speak, yet his presence was comforting. Lyra had faced countless enemies, countless challenges, yet this quiet moment felt like a victory of a different kind. An opening of the heart, a recognition of value beyond strength, and the start of something entirely new. The galaxy, with its endless stars and distant worlds, was vast and unpredictable. But Lyra and Ethan were learning, slowly, that together they could face it, side by side with courage, understanding, and a bond that transcended expectations. And so, as the night deepened over Corinth, the fierce princess and the human walked, not as teacher and student, not as warrior and outsider, but as companions beginning a journey that would test, surprise, and perhaps even change them forever. The morning air in Corinth was sharp and cool, carrying a hint of the metallic tang of distant starports. Princess Lyra was already awake, moving through her training grounds with her usual precision, when the message arrived. A small, discreet drone hovered near her balcony and projected the urgent notice into the air. An alien fleet, long considered neutral in the politics of the Illyrian system, had made a sudden and aggressive move near the border planets. Reports indicated that they were testing defenses, probing weaknesses, and challenging the authority of the Corinthian Council. The news sent ripples through the palace, sparking a flurry of activity. Ambassadors whispered frantically, generals consulted their strategies, and courtiers grew pale with anxiety. Lyra's expression remained calm, but her mind raced. She had faced countless training exercises, sparred with the best warriors, and commanded forces in simulations, yet this was different. Real lives were at stake, not just pride or protocol. She moved swiftly to the council chamber, Ethan close behind, his presence steady and reassuring. The council was in chaos. Hollow projections of ships moved across the air with blinking lights, showing fleets maneuvering near the outer planets. Advisors spoke over each other, each claiming their strategies were best. Some urged caution, others called for immediate strikes, but none seemed to consider the unpredictability of the attackers. Lyra raised her hand, and silence fell. "Listen carefully," she said, her voice sharp yet calm. "We cannot act on fear or arrogance. We must assess the situation, understand the enemy, and respond with both strength and strategy. There is no room for hesitation or error. Humans often face threats without the advantage of overwhelming power. We rely on adaptability, observation, and unconventional strategies. Perhaps a combination of your strength and tactical flexibility could be effective here." They were fragile, slow, and untested, yet Ethan spoke with confidence, not arrogance, and Lyra nodded in support. "Proceed," she said. "We will listen to his strategy." Small, mobile squads would intercept key points of the enemy fleet, while decoy ships would mislead and divide them. He suggested using the environment, asteroid belts, gravitational currents, and communication disruptions to give Corinth's forces an advantage. Lyra listened closely. She recognized the logic immediately. While the council was trapped in conventional thinking, Ethan had considered variables they had ignored. His approach relied on observation, adaptability, and understanding, not just brute force. "You may be untested, human," she said, "but your plan makes sense. I will oversee its execution." Orders were given, squads were mobilized, and the human-designed strategy began to take shape. Days passed with tense preparation. Lyra trained relentlessly, drilling her warriors, inspecting equipment, and ensuring that every unit understood the plan. Ethan moved quietly among the officers and soldiers, guiding them where needed, answering questions, and adjusting strategies as new information arrived. His calm demeanor and clarity earned him the respect of many, though some remained skeptical. Finally, the enemy fleet arrived at the outer border. Shadows of alien ships stretched across the cosmic void, dark and imposing. Sensors blinked rapidly as their positions were tracked, and Lyra's command center was alive with activity. She moved between consoles, issuing orders with precision, while Ethan stood nearby, analyzing patterns and offering real-time adjustments. The first skirmish erupted near a dense asteroid belt. Lyra led a squadron of fast interceptors, weaving through rocks with deadly accuracy. Ethan's calculations guided the interceptors, telling them when to strike, when to retreat, and how to lure the enemy into traps. The combination of Lyra's martial skill and Ethan's strategic insight began to turn the tide. Enemy ships, expecting conventional attacks, were thrown off by the decoys and sudden maneuvers. Several were caught in gravitational traps, spinning helplessly into asteroid fields. Lyra marveled at the effectiveness of the plan. Strength alone would never have achieved this. Intelligence, observation, and courage combined had created an advantage even the most experienced commanders had overlooked. Hours passed in a tense ballet of ships, lasers, and careful maneuvering. Lyra remained in the thick of it, her instincts guiding her actions, her warriors responding flawlessly. Ethan's quiet voice occasionally called out adjustments, small observations that made the difference between success and disaster. During a critical moment, a squad of enemy fighters broke through the front line, heading straight for the palace world. Lyra's heart pounded, but she did not hesitate. She led a squad to intercept them, moving with unmatched precision. One fighter aimed directly at the palace gate, and a human pilot froze in fear. Without thinking, Ethan leapt into action, directing the pilot with clear instructions that allowed the interceptor to divert the threat without unnecessary loss. Lyra felt a spark of admiration. The human was not a warrior in the traditional sense, but his courage, quick thinking, and presence under pressure were just as vital as any weapon. She realized that strength alone did not guarantee victory. Adaptability and intelligence were equally important. By nightfall, the first wave of attacks had been repelled. The enemy fleet regrouped, showing signs of frustration and confusion. Lyra and Ethan convened with their commanders, reviewing the results and preparing for the next phase. There was no time for celebration. The battle had only just begun. "Your approach is working," Lyra said quietly, standing beside Ethan as they watched the stars. "I underestimated humans before. I see now there is much we can learn from your kind. And I am learning from you, Princess. Strength, courage, and leadership are universal, but your people have a discipline I have rarely seen." Ethan's presence was steady, unwavering, a reminder that courage came in many forms. Over the next days, the battle continued. Skirmishes erupted across multiple sectors, each testing the limits of Corinth's defenses. Lyra remained in command, her warriors inspired by her courage and skill. Ethan moved alongside her, offering strategies, analyzing the enemy, and guiding decisions with clarity and precision. The combination of human ingenuity and Illyrian strength proved formidable. During one particularly dangerous engagement, Lyra found herself separated from the main fleet. A squad of elite enemy fighters approached, intent on capturing or killing her. She engaged them directly, her combat skills unmatched, but there were too many, and exhaustion began to take its toll. Then Ethan appeared. He had piloted a small craft alone, navigating through enemy fire to reach her. Using a combination of tactics and improvisation, he created openings, drawing the enemy's attention and allowing Lyra to regain her advantage. Together, they turned the encounter around, defeating the squad without significant losses. As they returned to the main fleet, Lyra's respect and trust for the human deepened. He was no longer just a companion. He was an equal partner in both strategy and survival. She realized that humans were underestimated not because they were weak, but because their strengths were unconventional, unpredictable, and often overlooked. By the end of the week, the enemy fleet had been forced to retreat. Corinth was safe, but the battle had changed the perception of both humans and the fierce princess. Courtiers who had whispered in doubt now looked with admiration. Ambassadors sent messages of respect, acknowledging the effectiveness of the combined strategy. And Lyra, standing on the balcony overlooking the city, felt a quiet pride, not just in victory, but in the partnership that had made it possible. Ethan joined her, leaning against the railing with a calm smile. "You led them well," he said. "Your strength inspired them. And your trust in me, that made all the difference." It was about connection, collaboration, and the courage to rely on others. And in Ethan, she had found a companion who embodied all of those qualities: courage, insight, and unwavering calm. As the twin suns rose once more, painting the city in gold, Lyra and Ethan stood side by side, watching the horizon. The battle had tested them, challenged them, and revealed the strengths they could not have known alone. Together, they had faced the unknown and emerged victorious, not just as princess and human, but as partners, equals, and allies. The galaxy remained vast, full of danger, uncertainty, and challenges yet to come. But for Lyra, fierce and unyielding, and Ethan, clever and courageous, the path ahead seemed clearer. Together, they could face any threat, bridge any gap, and perhaps even reshape the expectations of entire civilizations. The stars above glittered like distant promises, and for the first time, Lyra allowed herself to imagine a future filled with hope, partnership, and the possibility of something entirely new. And in that quiet moment, side by side, human and princess, warrior and strategist, they both understood that courage, intelligence, and trust could be more powerful than any weapon, and that the galaxy itself might bend in favor of those who dared to combine them. The palace of Corinth had quieted since the last wave of attacks, but tension lingered like smoke. Lyra moved through the halls with her usual precision, yet her mind was restless. The human beside her, Ethan, had proven that courage and ingenuity could alter the course of battle, but the threats to her people were far from over. She knew that enemies would not forget so easily, and neither would the political forces that sought to undermine her. The council gathered once more, their voices low, their expressions wary. Reports had arrived that a neighboring empire, long waiting for the right moment, had mobilized a larger fleet and was heading toward Corinth. The move was clear. They wanted to test the princess to see if her leadership was as formidable as her reputation. Lyra's jaw tightened. This was no longer a test of skill alone. It was a test of strategy, courage, and the unity of her people. Ethan stood beside her as they entered the council chamber. His calm presence was a steadying force, one that Lyra had come to rely on more than she cared to admit. He did not speak first, instead allowing the generals and advisors to present their strategies. He listened carefully, noting every detail, every potential weakness in their plans. Then, when all had spoken, he began to suggest modifications. "Your forces are strong," he said, "but predictability is a weakness. The enemy will expect conventional defense lines. If we can introduce movement, misdirection, and adaptability, we can turn their expectation against them. We must act faster than they anticipate, and we must anticipate faster than they can react." His suggestions combined human creativity with practical knowledge of alien tactics, creating a plan that was unconventional but effective. "Prepare the squadrons," she commanded. "We will use Ethan's strategy. I will oversee the operation myself." Interceptor squads were positioned to exploit weaknesses. Decoys were launched to draw attention and divide enemy forces. And throughout it all, Ethan guided the adjustments, recalculating movements, predicting enemy maneuvers, and ensuring that the plan remained flexible. When the enemy fleet arrived, it was larger and more coordinated than the previous force. Their ships glinted in the starlight, weapons primed, formations tight. They expected to intimidate, to overpower, to test the princess and her people. But Corinth was ready. Lyra led the first wave personally, piloting her craft with unmatched skill. She moved through the battlefield like a shadow, striking precise blows and retreating before the enemy could respond. Ethan's voice guided the fleet, not with commands but with insight. He called out opportunities, predicted traps, and observed patterns that even seasoned commanders had overlooked. The battle was intense. Ships clashed, energy beams cut through space, and explosions flared in distant sectors. Lyra felt the familiar rush of adrenaline, the focus that came with life-or-death combat. Yet there was something different this time. She was not alone. Ethan's calm presence, his steady guidance, his understanding of unpredictability allowed her to fight not just with strength, but with strategy. During a critical moment, a massive enemy cruiser broke through the front line and headed directly toward the planet's capital. Lyra's squadron pursued it, but the cruiser was faster, stronger, and heavily armed. She realized that brute force alone would not suffice. She looked to Ethan, who had anticipated the move. "Use the gravity currents near the asteroid field," he said. "Divert it slightly off course. The cruiser's mass will work against it." The cruiser veered unexpectedly, throwing its formation into chaos. Corinth's interceptors exploited the opening, striking with precision and forcing the enemy to retreat. The battle continued, wave after wave, yet each time, Lyra and Ethan adapted, turning disadvantage into advantage. As the hours passed, Lyra's respect for the human deepened. His courage was quiet, not loud or showy, but unwavering. He did not hesitate in the face of danger. He did not panic when situations became complex. Instead, he observed, calculated, and acted. And through it all, he treated her as an equal, not a princess, not a figurehead, but a partner in the fight for her people. Finally, after days of relentless conflict, the enemy fleet began to withdraw. Their attacks had failed to break Corinth's defenses, and the combination of Lyra's martial skill and Ethan's ingenuity had turned the tide decisively. The palace erupted in cautious celebration. Courtiers and citizens alike praised the princess's leadership and the humans' unexpected brilliance. Lyra, however, did not feel victorious in the way she had in previous battles. She felt something deeper, quieter, and more profound. She had learned that strength was not measured solely by skill or power, but by trust, collaboration, and the courage to rely on others. And in Ethan, she had found someone who embodied all of these qualities. That evening, Lyra walked through the palace gardens, her mind heavy with thought. The twin suns had set, leaving the sky painted in shades of deep violet and gold. She paused near a fountain, the water reflecting the stars above. Ethan joined her silently, as he often did, and together they watched the quiet beauty of the world she had fought to protect. "You fought well today," Ethan said softly. "Not just in combat, but in leadership. Your people followed you because they trust you. That is rarer than any weapon. Courage alone is not enough. Intelligence alone is not enough, but together it can move mountains or fleets." And she had found that in a human, of all beings, whose people her kind had long underestimated. The palace itself seemed quieter, almost respectful, as if acknowledging the shift in perception. Humans were no longer seen as fragile outsiders, but as clever, courageous allies capable of impacting the course of the galaxy. And Lyra, fierce and unyielding, was no longer just a warrior princess feared and admired. She was a leader who could recognize value beyond appearances, who could trust, and who could inspire both her people and the galaxy. A gentle wind blew across the gardens, carrying the scent of alien blooms. Lyra reached out and took Ethan's hand, a gesture both simple and profound. He looked at her not with surprise but with understanding and squeezed her hand lightly. There was no declaration, no grand statement, only acknowledgement. In that silent exchange, they shared the understanding that their bond was no longer just about strategy or survival. It was something more. As the night deepened, Lyra spoke quietly. "I have faced countless battles, yet this feels like the first time I have truly fought for something that matters beyond myself. For trust, for connection, for the people I lead. You have both now." The city below seemed alive, filled with lives shaped by courage, trust, and determination. And for the first time, Lyra felt a sense of completeness, not just as a warrior, not just as a princess, but as someone capable of forging bonds that could change not only her world but the galaxy itself. The stars above glimmered, distant yet familiar, and Lyra realized that the universe was vast, unpredictable, and filled with challenges. Yet with courage, intelligence, and trust, it was also filled with possibilities. She squeezed Ethan's hand once more, feeling the quiet certainty that together they could face whatever came next. And in that quiet moment, amidst the alien blooms and the fading light of twin suns, Lyra understood something vital. The fiercest battles were not always fought with weapons. Sometimes they were fought with courage, trust, and the willingness to walk beside someone who dared to see the world differently, and to see her as she truly was. For the first time in her life, the fierce princess allowed herself to hope. And in that hope, she saw the future, vast, challenging, but full of promise. With humans, with allies, and with Ethan by her side, she was ready to face it all. The galaxy waited, unpredictable and infinite, but Lyra no longer felt alone. She had strength, courage, and trust. She had an ally who challenged her, inspired her, and walked beside her. And in that combination, she discovered a force greater than any weapon, greater than fear, greater than tradition, and perhaps greater than destiny itself. The sky above Corinth burned with color as the twin suns rose, casting their light across the city and the distant spaceports. Rumors of the enemy's return had spread through the palace overnight, and the council met again in tense urgency. Princess Lyra stood at the head of the chamber, her presence commanding attention. She did not look fearful or uncertain, she looked resolute. Beside her, Ethan's calm gaze reminded her that courage could be shared, that ingenuity could turn the tide even when the enemy was stronger. This time the fleet approaching was massive. It was no longer a test or a probe. The neighboring empire had committed fully, seeking to crush Corinth's defenses and assert dominance. The palace trembled under the weight of anticipation. Courtiers whispered in fear, advisors fretted over strategy, and generals argued over numbers and formations. Lyra listened to them all, but her mind was already working, connecting the patterns, visualizing the battlefield. "Prepare the squadrons," she said clearly. "We fight as one. The enemy expects us to react. We will act first. We will divide their fleet, create openings, and strike where they least expect it. We will combine your combat leadership with rapid maneuvers and calculated risks. Trust your warriors, and trust the strategy." Heavy cruisers moved into precise formations. Decoys were launched into space, their energy signatures mimicking real warships. And through it all, Lyra walked among her people, inspiring confidence, correcting mistakes, and ensuring that every warrior understood the stakes. When the enemy fleet appeared on the sensors, stretching across the horizon like a shadowy tide, Lyra felt the familiar surge of adrenaline. Her fleet was ready, not just because of firepower, but because of precision, coordination, and trust. Ethan's strategies had turned weaknesses into strengths, and now the moment had arrived to test them fully. The first wave of combat erupted near the asteroid belts that fringed the system. Lyra led her interceptors with grace and precision, weaving through rocks, dodging enemy fire, and striking with deadly accuracy. The enemy had anticipated a conventional approach, but Lyra and her forces moved unpredictably, guided by Ethan's insight. Ambushes were set, flanks were exploited, and the enemy's momentum faltered. In the heart of the battle, Lyra faced the enemy commander herself, a skilled warrior, confident and ruthless. Their ships collided in a deadly dance, each trying to anticipate the other's movements. Lyra's strength was formidable, but the commander was cunning, striking with calculated precision. Time and again they clashed, their skills evenly matched. From the command center, Ethan observed the engagement, analyzing patterns. Princess, the commander is predictable in their offense. Exploit the left flank after their next maneuver. You can outmaneuver them if you use the asteroid currents. She followed his guidance, adjusting her approach, weaving through the natural obstacles of space. The enemy commander was forced into retreat, their formation broken. Lyra's fleet pressed forward, striking decisively, and the tide of the battle shifted. Meanwhile, the rest of the enemy fleet struggled against the coordinated human-Illyrian strategy. Smaller squads moved unpredictably, decoys drew attention, and precision strikes weakened their defenses. Ethan's calm voice guided them, offering insights and adjustments in real time. Every decision mattered, and every choice relied on trust in strategy, trust in warriors, and trust in one another. Hours passed in relentless combat. Explosions flared across space, lights blinked from damaged ships, and alarms echoed through Current's fleet. Yet Lyra remained composed, her focus unwavering. She directed her warriors, adapted to surprises, and executed maneuvers that showcased both her skill and her ability to trust Ethan's guidance. At a critical moment, the enemy launched a concentrated strike aimed directly at Current's planetary defenses. Lyra's attention sharpened. She saw the danger, calculated the risks, and made a bold decision. Her squadron intercepted the strike head-on, drawing enemy fire while the main fleet executed a flanking maneuver. The gambit was dangerous but necessary. Ethan's voice called out instructions, precise and confident. Use the gravitational currents to your advantage, divert their focus, strike at the engines first. The combined effect of courage, strength, and ingenuity was undeniable. As the final wave of enemy ships fled into space, Lyra allowed herself a moment to breathe. The battle was won, the city safe, and the Empire had witnessed the power of a princess willing to fight not alone, but with a partner who brought a new perspective, a new strength, and unexpected courage. The palace erupted in celebration. Courtiers cheered, ambassadors sent messages of respect, and the people of Corinth hailed their princess and the human who had stood by her side. Lyra, however, did not seek glory. She moved among her warriors, acknowledging their efforts, offering praise, and ensuring that the victory was shared by all. Ethan joined her afterward, quietly observing the scene. "You led them well," he said softly. "Your people followed because they trusted you. That is the truest form of strength." Today proved it. And through it she had discovered a force stronger than any weapon, connection. Ethan's hand brushed against hers, not in ceremony, not in protocol, but in quiet acknowledgement. Lyra allowed herself to take it, feeling the warmth and reassurance it brought. The gesture was simple, yet profound. It was a promise, a bond, and a shared understanding of everything they had faced together. The palace lights twinkled in the distance, reflecting off the crystal towers and polished streets. Lyra paused, looking up at the sky. The stars above seemed endless, a reminder of the vast galaxy and the adventures yet to come. She knew that the path ahead would be filled with challenges, but she no longer felt alone. She had strength, courage, trust, and a companion who walked beside her willingly. "You have changed my perspective," Lyra said quietly. "Humans were always underestimated, yet today you showed me what they are capable of. I see now that strength is not only about power. It is about courage, intelligence, and the willingness to act when it matters most. Perhaps this is the beginning of something more, not just for us, but for all of Corinth, and perhaps for the galaxy. Humans and Illyrians can achieve much when we trust each other." The palace that had once been a place of isolation now felt alive with possibility. The future, uncertain yet full of potential, stretched before them like the endless stars. As night fully descended, Lyra stopped near a reflecting pool. She looked at her own reflection and then at Ethan beside her. She saw not just a warrior, not just a human, but two beings connected by courage, trust, and shared experiences. The bond they had formed was rare, extraordinary, and powerful. "You are not what I expected," she said softly, smiling. "Nor are you," he replied. "And perhaps that is why we work so well together." The palace, the city, and the galaxy could wait. For now, she allowed herself a moment of peace, knowing that the fiercest battles could be won not by power alone, but by partnership, courage, and the willingness to trust. Ethan's hand still held hers, a quiet anchor in the vastness of the universe. Together they had faced impossible odds, challenged tradition, and proven that strength came in many forms. Lyra felt a warmth she had long denied herself, the comfort of companionship, the reassurance of trust, and the hope that the future could be different. The twin suns' light had faded completely, leaving the stars to shine in quiet brilliance. Lyra and Ethan stood together, not as princess and human, not as warrior and outsider, but as equals, companions, and partners ready to face whatever came next. The galaxy was vast and unpredictable, yet for the first time, Lyra felt that anything was possible. And in that quiet, powerful moment, she understood something profound. Courage, intelligence, and trust, when combined, could move worlds, change hearts, and shape destinies. And with Ethan at her side, she was ready to embrace that future, whatever it might hold. The stars above glittered endlessly, and below, Corinth breathed a sigh of relief. The fierce princess had found her partner, the human had found his place, and together they had shown the galaxy the true power of unity, trust, and courage.